Welcome back. You're watching One on One. We're speaking with humanitarian and activist Steve Sosebee. We ended up setting up the Palestine Children's Relief Fund, and it really started to escalate. So Mansour was the first real case where you managed to see what you could do in terms of making a difference. Tell me how things grew after that.
Well, Mansour was before I started PCRF, actually. I didn't have a long-term outlook on doing more than just Mansour. I felt at that time, he was a boy, I wanted to help him, I helped him. And what I realized is two things. First, there was a huge need, and there were plenty more kids like Mansour who were not getting adequate care in Palestine, who needed treatment, and they were suffering and had a very miserable life in front of them without anyone coming in and trying to assist them. And secondly, that there was a great amount of resources and goodwill outside for linking these kids with caregivers, hospitals, a community who would assist them. And all it needed was somebody to basically come in and facilitate between the need and the caregivers, and that's what I was willing to do. So, I started slowly placing child by child in different institutions, and it slowly grew as people saw that this is one way to really have a positive effect on the lives of children in Palestine.
And in what way were you able to connect them with the right resources? Because that's one of the tricky parts. Getting children out of the Palestinian occupied territories is a challenge in itself.
It's much more challenging today than it was 20 years ago. Today, with the siege and with the difficulties, and particularly in Gaza, getting kids out requires an enormous amount of effort and communication on the part of our staff in Gaza. We managed to do it, but at that time, linking them with the institutions first in the States and later into Europe required just a lot of networking, research. But what I found is just an enormous amount of goodwill. To be honest with you, the American people don't often get recognized in Palestine or in the Middle East for their willingness to open their hospitals, open their hearts, open their homes to kids from Palestine or from Iraq and other areas in the region. But the fact is that over 1,000 children have gone for treatment in the States for free. No doctor, no American doctor has ever asked for payment for treating these kids, and no hospital has ever taken payment for treating these kids. And that's a great humanitarian gesture, and it says a lot about, I think, the amount of goodwill that exists in the U.S. towards these type of humanitarian cases. They didn't ask me, is this child Palestinian or not, or is he Iraqi or not? They saw a child who needed help, and they were willing to help them.
Some of the injuries are pretty horrific as well, weren't they?
Yeah, of course. You're talking about the use of high ordnance weaponry in very urban populated areas. So you see a lot of children with significant amputations, head injuries, disfigurement, and yes, it's very disturbing, unfortunately.
One light that did appear in all of this, apart from the success of helping these children, was that you met your wife while you were in Palestine as well. Tell me how that happened.
I met my wife, Huda Al-Masri, in 1991. She was working for the YMCA. They had a rehabilitation program for injured kids during the first Intifada. And I was just starting PCRF, and somebody had connected us. She had a child or two who needed treatment outside, and she had heard about somebody like myself. And we set up a meeting by chance and fell in love. I fell in love with her the moment I saw her. And we had, kind of a very unique romantic courtship, very innocent one during the first year in Palestine. And here was an American guy marrying a Palestinian woman, and in Palestine.
How did people react?
Everybody who saw us knew that it was meant to be, and I never had a problem from any religious extremist, any cultural extremist, any racist, bigot. No one ever voiced their opposition to our intermarriage, despite our racial and religious differences, cultural differences, ethnic differences. It never became an issue between us. We were completely happy from the day we met.
Of course, she eventually had 2 children to bring up and care for as well.
That's right. We have 2 beautiful daughters, Dima and Jenna.
In 2009, Huda passed away of leukemia. How have you coped with that?
Well, it's difficult, obviously, for many reasons. First, she was the love of my life, and we were connected in so many ways. We worked together 24 hours together and 7 days a week. We never were separated by offices. We were separated only when I would travel away from her. So we had a very strong bond and connection. And when you lose somebody like that, obviously it has not just an emotional and psychological effect, but there's a physical effect that it has as well. That person who's part of your life physically, in addition to all of the other things I mentioned, is not there anymore. So it's affected me, obviously. I mean, you know, I'm living with a broken heart, but I have a strong spiritual belief that there's a purpose for everything in life. And my wife came for a reason and gave me 2 children and built this organization and gave me the happiest years that any man could live through. And now she's gone, and for whatever reason, whether it's spiritual or what have you, I have to carry on, and I have a duty and a responsibility in her memory and for my daughters to be a good man and to take the legacy that my wife had built with me and to take it further and to continue the work that we had built together.
And you found strength in your work, seeing the good you're doing for the kids as well.
I think so. I think if I had any type of other occupation that didn't have, I think this, I just feel like there's a true meaning having a positive impact in the lives of, you know, children who are suffering under this type of economic or political or social circumstances. Being able to affect them in a positive way gives me strength, certainly, at a time when I need it, and enables me to move forward at a time when it's easy to fall off one's path, and to keep going.
Can the Palestine Children's Relief Fund keep up with the needs, the pressures put on it, with the pace? I mean, things haven't improved for the Palestinians. They've got worse, if anything, especially with the situation in Gaza. Can it keep up with the demands, you know, and pressure placed upon it?
No, we have to try. Unfortunately, every time, and this is, you talk to anybody who's worked in Palestine as long as I have, and every year we always say to each other, it can't get any worse, and every year it gets worse. So we have to try. I mean, nobody can predict the future. If you told me 2 years ago I would be a single father raising 2 daughters, I would have not laughed, but certainly looked at you with a sense of that you're crazy. But nobody knows what's going to happen in Palestine, but I know that we have now a specific structure. We have a huge amount of volunteers and supporters who enable us to do more. And we're learning from our mistakes. We're trying to get better. We're using the tools that exist for small organizations like ours with technology and so on to reach more people and to do a better job. I mean, it's just distressing to see how a nation of people can continue to be collectively punished for no real crime that they've committed other than just of a certain place where they live geographically or their nationality. And I'm going to continue, and the PCRF will continue to do what we can and to play a positive role in as many lives as we can. And hopefully the impact that we have will continue to be a positive one, and that we'll be able to do as much as we can given the circumstances.
Who have been your mentors in life?
Well, there are 2 types of mentors that have affected me. There are those who are strangers, who show acts of kindness and generosity, a certain level of a human connection between people. Maybe it's a one-time experience where you meet somebody who does something kind, shows an act of kindness, and then disappears and never in your life again. And then which, you know, is not uncommon. And then there are those, you know, on a philosophical level. Of course, I mentioned my parents, but, you know, I always look at the great men and women in history who've sacrificed and looked beyond themselves and their comforts and struggled for those on an intellectual or philosophical level. Men like Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and Gandhi, and great men. Of course, I'm not trying to compare myself to them, but I use them as models of how I try to live my life and to serve a greater cause than just my own.
You're very dedicated, and I know you spend a lot of time working on the issues that you have to deal with. Do you get time for yourself? Do you get any downtime?
Of course. It's important. I mean, you can't survive. You get burned out very easily if you don't find time to reflect or to try to live a social life. And I definitely do that. I'm not a creature who is dedicated to the point where I neglect my family or even neglect myself. I think this is a marathon. It's a long, long haul. It's a life mission. And I've recognized that if I don't try to take care of myself spiritually, physically, psychologically, that I will not be able to give my full energy and effort towards this mission.
How would you like to be remembered? What would you like your legacy to be?
That's a good question. I would like to be remembered as somebody who acted out of love and compassion for his fellow man, who saw injustice and worked for justice in a positive way, not in a destructive way, who did not allow the threats and the intimidation of those who don't agree with the cause that I'm serving to dissuade me, and on either side, and who worked for the benefit and the improvement of his fellow man. There's so much work to be done in this life in so many ways, environmentally, ecologically, economically, politically, and I'm trying to find my own special niche where I can try to make a difference, however small. And I want to be remembered by those who I served as somebody who acted out of love.
Steve, I wish you luck with your work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.